Welcome to Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? DT2 Comic Chat here, and you can tell by my background what we're going to talk about tonight. The Sloppy Spoilers crew and I are going to dive into Moon Knight. Now, if you're not familiar with the comic character, then we're going to try to give you some more of the background. But I personally try to approach it as if I'd never seen anything before. What would be my response? So that's going to be my perspective tonight. Let me bring on my co-host. Welcome to David, Nemesis Howard.
Yo, what's up? Hey, did you know you have the Fist of Khonshu behind you?
Really?
Hey, I'm looking forward to this. Moon Knight is one of my favorite, lesser known comic book characters from Marvel. Really enjoyed this. The series, I think there's stuff that's good. I think there's stuff that I would criticize, but I'm looking forward to talking about it. It's going to be fun.
Let's say welcome to Steve, Shadewing Sellers. What's up, Dr. Steve?
Steve? I thought I was Jake Lockley. No, Moon Knight is actually like one of those really obscure comic characters that I really like. And I think it's really because I like a lot of the ideas behind him. There have been some really great stories with him, but I think it's really kind of more, I just like that they took like a little bit of the Batman mythos and then mixed it with all of the Egyptian gods and, you know, the supernatural and, you know, the whole concept of dissociative identity disorder. And they just mashed it together into this really bizarre series and character. And I can't really wait to get into it. This particular show, I kind of feel like there are good things about it, things I don't like so much as a comic purist, and things that I'm like, okay, it's not what I would have done, but I can kind of see where they're going for. So it'll be fun to getting into that.
We're going to touch on each one of those things that Steve talked about. Welcome to Jeff, Dr. Faye Bracey. What's up, Bracey?
Hello, everyone. Why am I wearing a Santa Claus hat? Because it's crazy. That's why. And there's a lot of crazy in Moon Knight, and I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Okay, tonight we're going to talk about episode 1, The Goldfish Problem. I'll do initial thoughts and throw it out to my co-host. Again, my perspective on approaching this was, what if I didn't know anything about the comics? How does the series come across? So I try to watch it with that perspective. And I have to say that it didn't grab me until Ethan Hawke shows up for the third time. When Ethan Hawke's character shows up and starts validating what's going on and giving a little bit of answers, that's when I got a little bit more invested. But what I did not like was that, once again, it leans too heavily into the comedic, but it kind of redeems itself by episode's end. Maybe I haven't watched other episodes yet, so I don't know if they maintain that tone. But there really wasn't really enough to grab me as an audience viewer if I don't have any background on the character. Because as soon as I saw the approach they were taking, because I do understand the character, I was like, oh, okay, I see kind of like how they're going about it. But picking Steven, and, you know, Steven is just another like perpetual loser caught up in the situation, and he's trying to figure out what's going on as he goes. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever. And then there's the snark. If the characters aren't snarky, the situations are snarky. That's kind of a Marvel Disney thing now. I was like, whatever, that didn't grab me. So when Ethan Hawke shows up, it's Ethan Hawke's character that gives enough gravitas about halfway through that made me want to finish watching the episode. That's what I did not like. What I did like was the fact that this is very clearly not Batman. And I really, really, really hoped that, you know, this would not be Marvel's version of Batman. And so far, we're still just one episode in terms of this review right now. Like Steve said, they do borrow some things, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I liked the idea of, if you know anything, well, you don't, again, let's assume you don't know anything. I like the idea of being part of something, but parts of you are part of the thing. And then parts of you are not the thing at all, but you're caught up in the middle of something. And then the dissociative identity disorder. And then the whole idea that you can not be a hero, but be some kind of force on the earth is also very, very intriguing, because we haven't seen anything in this episode that would identify Moon Knight as a superhero. He's very much in his own world. In every way you want to take that, he's in his own world. And I thought that was enough of a hook to make me want to see what happens next, because it's not about fighting crime, which would make him another Batman. It's about figuring out what's going on. Okay. And if it was me, if I was Steve in that situation, I would have called everything I knew. I would have been like, oh, elders, fleet, strong and wise, appear before my seeking eyes. I would have tried to find out what was going on, And so if we're going to take that kind of approach, then that's enough to make me want to see. But it's a lot like Wheel of Time. It's not Steven I care about. It's the story. But maybe that'll change as things go on. So let me hear from my co-host. Let me hear your initial impressions. Start with Nims.
Yeah, there's a couple different levels that I watch this on, that I read Moon Knight on. Before I start, I will say that I was waiting to binge the whole series. I binged what's there so far. I would encourage everybody who is watching this to go out and buy Richard Riordan's The Kane Chronicles, which deals with Egyptian mythology and Egyptian magic, and read those. And then you'll be able to really compare how they're using Egyptian mythology here, how he uses Egyptian mythology and real Egyptian mythology. I say that because I've loved studying mythology all my life. And right after Greek mythology is Egyptian mythology that I've studied. And some of it they got right, some of it they didn't. And so number one with that was Khonshu. Khonshu in traditional mythology has nothing to do with what Khonshu is here, but it works. Somehow they've turned Khonshu into basically the god of vengeance, against evildoers. So that's what, Moon Knight is all about. And what they've done here, it's not too far from what he's depicted as in some comics, because there's a run where he did have supernatural strength and stuff, but a lot of the times he used his money and his training as a mercenary, the Mark Specter, to create weapons and technology and stuff like that. So I'm not sure which one is better, but I enjoyed what I saw, and and it was comics accurate to a certain era. The other part is that I thought was a little more confusing was the whole Ammit storyline, because Ammit in traditional Egyptian mythology is a devourer of souls, and basically is a goddess that just sits there. And when Osiris gets done judging the souls of an individual using the scales, if you failed and your heart didn't measure up to the feather of truth, your soul was fed to Ammit, and Ammit ate it. So I'm not sure how all of this plays out, and it felt a little strange that there would be this whole cult to the Devourer of Souls, and the Devourer of Souls was going to bring about, I guess, a paradise on earth, although a very authoritarian, violent, bloody paradise on earth. That's the way they're going to achieve it. That said, I thought the villain was definitely creepy. The whole cult was creepy. It had almost like a more evil, more violent Stepford Wives feel to it. So I enjoyed that. What we've seen so far, especially in where I guess they were in Austria, where they all seem to be worshiping it and everything, and then it turns on a dime and they become violent. So it definitely sets up the rest of the series. So I enjoyed it, but I would encourage other people, especially because I enjoy the Kane Chronicles and I enjoy Egyptian mythology so much. Check those out as well, because I think there are points later on in the series we could definitely talk about how I think this series is stealing some stuff from Riordan. So,
and also, if you didn't know, the 10 plagues of Egypt in the scriptures that correspond to each one of the Egyptians' gods, and they were personally kind of defeated by those plagues. There's that biblical tie-in as well, for those of you that are interested in that. And the thing about it is, when you're dealing with a pantheon of gods, just like Greek mythology, each one has like their own personality or their own focus, if you will. And so, yeah, when they're just talking about how faithful are they to their traditional depictions and what are they doing in this particular thing, and how deep into each area are we going to go. That's the other thing that happened in this pilot episode, and that is that there's so many threads here. Is that which one is going to be the focus? How deep into them are we going to go?
I will add that later on, some of the deep dive they took, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but some of the deep dive they took on like Shabti and Egyptian magic and the way Egyptian magic worked and things like that, their system of magic within their whole cosmology and everything is really, really well done in this series. And you could tell that someone, we guess from the name, he is probably of Egyptian heritage, if he's not from Egypt, did this show. And I appreciate it. I love that about it. It was really good. So
cool. Okay, initial thoughts, Steve.
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit more into the comics dive on this because I think that Nem has already gone pretty well into the Egyptian mythology and probably better than I would have done. In regard to that, I'm actually not that bothered by this because it's consistent with what Khonshu has been in the comics. He's always been kind of this, god of vengeance that brought Mark Specter back from the dead. Supposedly, I mean, at first they kind of him and haw around it. Did he die? Did he not die? Later on, they just full on admit, yeah, this is the avatar of Khonshu. Khonshu's playing him, as part of his game with the gods and various things like that. And to that extent, I think that that's comics accurate. The thing of it is that I'm more interested in Mark Specter than I am in Stephen Grant.
Okay.
Mark Specter is comics accurate because they kept the backstory. I mean, he's a mercenary, a former mercenary who had done, some pretty horrible things. And then he dies. He comes back as the avatar of Khonshu. And then he becomes the Moon's Knight of Vengeance. The whole idea, and it's expanded upon a little bit later, that not only is he the Fist of Khonshu and the Avatar of Vengeance, in the Warren Ellis run, it was also established that he is a guardian of travelers at night. And so that's the reason why he goes out at night and beats up all these people, is because he is protecting travelers from being waylaid at night, because that is the domain of Khonshu. At least according to the Marvel version. Probably according to the Egyptian mythology might be a bit different.
It is. That is one of his aspects. So.
Okay. So I guess that Ellis was probably trying to be more true to that. But where they go completely full Disney is with Stephen Grant. And this is where they spend most of their time on in this episode. When they focus more on Mark, I like it more because I'm more interested in him, because this is the Mark I know, first of all. And also because I feel like he's more interesting. But they completely created the Stephen Grant character out of cold cloth, basically making him the comic relief of the show. He's a bit goofy. He's timid all the time. He does the whole, sort of thing. He doesn't have the confidence that Mark Spector does, and all of these other things. And he starts acting goofier in later episodes as well. But we'll get into that once we talk about that. And I understand why they do it for this episode. It's because they want a normal viewpoint to see him through. And the Stephen Grant in the comics is basically Bruce Wayne. He is what Bruce Wayne would be if that was like his whole persona. And so I think they kind of wanted to make him more relatable. So they put him in the gift shop. They tried to make him, give him something that was a bit more useful in terms of the story. So they made him essentially an expert in Egyptology, all of these angles. But the fact is that he's a completely new character within the context of this show. And while I think it works in the sense of making him like a main character in a horror, and that works at times, at other times he is just Disney goofy. And I just feel like it's almost obligatory just because they have to have the comic relief in there. And those moments are more forced. So I would say I have a mixed bag on this episode in the sense that I like a lot of what they're trying to do. I think they take a lot of the right things, but where they change it, it's kind of one of those things that is a little bit nail down the chalkboard as a fan of the character. And it's also one of those things that's like, really, you're really doing this? But at the same time, I like more than I disliked, and I can kind of see where, from a complete newbie's perspective, it might work for them.
Okay, well, using that type of approach, maybe they are trying to draw in a more generalized audience, or maybe they are trying to be more relatable. That's another word I'm tired of. Or maybe they're just trying to do something uh, to further the contrast between Batman, if you will. You know, I wouldn't have minded if Steven was a little bit more comics accurate. But again, what you said that jumped out to me the most was that we spend most of the episode with Steven, and that's the thing that jumped out to me as well. And I'm like, I was tired of the shtick about 15 minutes in. So if they had spent maybe like the first quarter hour doing the shtick, the him blacking out, him not knowing what's going on, him being in situations, okay, I could have taken that. But no, we've got to see him, you know, mess up a date, and no, we got to see him in dangerous situations, and no, we got to see his boss, you know, hate on him, and no, we've got to see him be completely confused, and no, we got to see him wake up in his loser apartment, and that made me tired. Go ahead, Bracy. Initial thoughts.
Yeah, I didn't like this version of Stephen Grant at all. It's become such a trope that you know, we've got to have the comic relief / loser character. There's this. It's almost like a pathological need at this point, it seems, to you know, just tear down the hero in some way. So I'm glad we do have the alternate personalities, which is, of course, comic accurate. And if you wanted to do Stephen Grant and not make him a wealthy socialite as he is in the comic books, why not a curator of the museum? Then he still has his background in Egyptology. You know, he's pretty put together. He could be a little socially awkward because he's really into the history and everything. But there was no need to make him this loser. And this guy is an abject loser. And it's not fun to watch a loser. It's just not fun. And I've seen this done much better in films like, say, Upgrade, where a guy who suffers a traumatic injury is given a brain implant, which gives him superpowers. And he has to deal with situations where, like, he's in horribly dangerous situations, but he can basically flick a switch and let the AI take control and kick butt for him. Excellent film if you haven't seen it, by the way. Really good sci-fi. So I've seen this sort of thing done better. Like Steve, I want to see more Mark Specter. And if you want the everyman perspective, why not Jake Lockley, since you mentioned it? Why not the cab driver? Why not the everyman? If that's the point of view we want, there's a guy who doesn't have to be a hero. As a matter of fact, his whole personality can just be that guy who just like minding my own business, staying out of trouble, doing my thing, just taking a guy from here to there, that sort of thing, you know, like New York cabbie kind of style thing going on. You know, or if he's going to set him up in London here, let him be a lorry driver, you know, whatever that you want to call it. So they've got that sort of thing going on. So there's ways to do that with Mark Specter or Moon Knight as we've got him in the comics. And like you, I got tired of him fast because, again, losers are just no fun to watch. It was amusing for a bit watching him deal with danger, and then, you know, the switch would flip and he wakes up and he's covered in blood. And I do appreciate the fact that for a Marvel piece of property, that was surprisingly graphic. And, you know, and he's not your standard superhero, not what we're used to from Marvel, outside of, say, the Netflix series, which have all gone to Marvel Plus now. You know, one of the guards for Ethan Hawke's character is like, yeah, he's killed 2 of our men. So this Moon Knight, when he's Moon Knight, is not going to be playing around. Speaking of Moon Knight, I did dig the costume quite a bit. I love the fact that as an artist, you tend to keep the costumes as simplified as you can because you're going to be drawing these things over and over and over again. And my hat's off to guys like Brian Hitch who can do really complex costumes and just draw them endlessly on a monthly schedule with no issues whatsoever. But that's not something most of us can do. In the movies, you get a chance to see really cool, detailed costumes. And unlike a lot of costumes, which are textured or detailed for no applicable reason. The most egregious one being the Brandon Routh Superman, like all the little super emblems in every little facet. I love this one because it's based off of a mummy. You know, it looks wrapped. It's got like the loincloth and the headpiece, and it's got like the Egyptian hieroglyphs on it. Very cool. This deviates quite a bit away from the comics in another significant way, whereas Moon Knight has had supernatural elements to his character in various runs, particularly Fist of Khonshu back in the 90s, where he started gaining superhuman strength with the waxing and waning of the moon. Here, interestingly, when he transforms, I was getting kind of Spawn vibes. This guy has been chosen. He is an agent, and he's got the cool glowing eyes now, and he just is 100% supernatural because Moon Knight really is started off as Marvel's ripoff of Batman. Total gadgeteer, rich guy, had the moon copter, he uses his moon sickle blades, you know, just all this stuff. He had himself like a French handyman who was basically your Alfred, all of that. So he became, he was fun, but he became way more interesting when they started getting into this split personality aspect, which also was a ripoff of Batman's various disguises, which was something picked up from Sherlock Holmes. So, you know, if you're going to steal from the best. But here they managed to do something very original with it. And I've always appreciated the character more for that. And it explains certain things that he can do in context. Another thing that I really like is the addition of Khonshu. Now, in the MCU we've seen so far, we have seen gods. And gods are basically superpowered aliens, more or less. And we've seen superpowered aliens who are strong enough to beat up these so-called gods. And we know with Thor Love and Thunder from the trailer that they're going to introduce the Olympians. But what I like about Khonshu here is he's the first god that really acts like a god. He disappears. He reappears. He pops into your dreams. He speaks in your head. He feels mythic. He does not feel like a superpowered alien at all. And I am digging that vibe, especially with something that's supposed to be this god of the moon and vengeance. It adds to that whole very mysterious vibe. And I love that they really recreated his latest iteration from the comic books, which includes a bird skull as his head. That is a relatively new addition to his look. But I dig that they did that there. So like it looks great on screen. Another
I'll
fun
just say
aspect.
really briefly that I love the F. Murray Abraham voice on Khonshu.
Yeah, it's a good choice. Good choice for a voice. Another interesting aspect was what's her name again? Amphet?
What?
Nemesis? What's the opposite goddess's name?
Ammit.
Ammit. My idea here with Ammit is it felt very much like Eclipso and the Specter to me. She is being propped up as another goddess of vengeance or justice because, you know, they're doing the whole balancing scales thing. So like with Thor, Marvel Thor is nothing like Norse Thor. They've done their own thing with it to make it fit a superhero context, and they've done the same thing with Khonshu, and they've also done that with Ammit. So what I'm getting here is that, you know, she talks about being betrayed by idle and capricious gods. So I feel like she used to be like the god of vengeance, and they probably decided, like, baby, you're way too extreme, and Khonshu is going to step in your domain. And I feel like that's where the conflict comes in, much like Eclipso in the comics was initially God's wrath, and he got supplanted by the Specter because he just went way off the rails. So that's kind of where I think they're going. I do like how the story built and where it ended. And even though I don't like Steven, there's a lot of the tone when we get away from Steven that I like. So I hope we're going to see less Steven, more Moon Knight, more of the other personalities, and more of this tone, because I do like the aspect of this cult of Ammit, because cults are always creepy. And like one of you guys said, with Steven in particular, in the museum scenes, this would have worked very well as a horror.
Well, just a quick comment. Because I'm sure we're going to hit on the scenes, but if we don't, I'll elaborate towards the end. But even though I like what they did here, I think that they use some mixed metaphors from the mythology standpoint. So Ammit is a half lion, half crocodile goddess. They eat the souls of the dead, but then her avatar summons a jackal, which is Anubis. And Anubis is also a death god. So why didn't they just use Anubis? Or Set, which is also another god, who's a god of chaos. And I want to talk about that.
And Seth is an established villain in the comics, by the way.
Yeah. And I want to talk about this idea of order and chaos, because they actually reference this at different points very subtly throughout the show. And it's great. They talk about Mott. They talk about the Duat, which is really cool that they mentioned that. There's Ethan.
They did their research.
Yeah, so there's some really cool Egyptian deep dives here. That's awesome to talk about.
And there's a lot of really good setup, I think, in some of these episodes, because some of the characters that come in later are seated in this episode early on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
definitely.
That's a good transition to talk about Arthur Harrow, played by Ethan Hawke. And I will briefly mention also a little bit about Amit in terms of what they were just talking about. I like Arthur. I like he's got the I'm just a vessel vibe. That's his whole approach, is I'm just a vessel. It's not my scarab. It's not me, that kind of thing, because that is makes you even creepier when you see cult leaders not taking any responsibility, but saying that they're being guided by their belief system and they're just, going with whatever the flow is. I did find it interesting, even though I know some of what was going on, was real or not, or in his head or not, or memories and flashbacks. I'm saying to myself, can you really just execute people and suck the life out of them in the middle of the street? Is like that okay now? Or, I'm just wondering, and I really like the bus scene where he phases out of seeing Khonshu, and then Khonshu's on the street, and then he's on the bus and he's waking up and he's screaming. Those scene cuts were really, really good. But I do like Arthur in that he seems charismatic is not the right word. I'll say dedicated. And that makes him even creepier, that he's committed to his cause, as are all the people. And I got vibes from the Mummy.
He's a true believer.
Yeah, Dylan, which is the scariest of all, like the operative in Serenity. And I got vibes of Imhotep, watching the people kind of flash their tattoos, talking about how they were a part of what Amit is doing.
I think Amit watched Minority Report one too many times. That's what I think.
I had the same thought.
In terms of other movies like this, one of my favorites is maybe a lesser-known movie called Unknown by Liam Neeson with January Jones, where basically it's the same kind of idea as Total Recall, except it's a little bit of a spin. But basically, you were a killer and you went too deep undercover, and then you believed your cover, and then turns out that you which is really funny because you change personalities and become this extremely moral person. But anyway, so I really like that movie, and Total Recall, of course, is a classic. So I like the idea here of that kind of thing about the one thread from the comic about never knowing whether or not it's real. I really, really liked, and then they made it real and all that. But the idea that Steven is never sure is straight from the comics, because they always spin it like, is this real? Is he dreaming this? Is he in an insane asylum? They had a whole run where you imagine the whole thing, that kind of thing. So it's like some AU stuff mixed in with real world stuff. But I still was a little confused. I'm like, okay, well, you're just, draining the life out of people. And it was very much like both The Mummy, Brendan Fraser's The Mummy, and Tom Cruise's The Mummy, where the evil deity or the antagonistic deity just drains the life out of people for vengeance. And I'm really hoping that they don't boil Ahmed down to just another jealous situation, because every time there's been a buildup, it always comes down to somebody broke my heart, or they did me wrong, or you stole my boyfriend. And that to me always lessens the impact of what's supposed to be going on with that type of antagonist. That's how I felt about the Boar Queen. First of all, I couldn't believe that they made a queen central figure out of the Borg, and then she was this oversexed, immature, high school, jealous kind of thing, trying to seduce Data, and then, strike back against Picard. I was like, really? So I'm hoping that's not where we go with this, that when we find out her backstory or find out or motivation in this series that is not just a bunch of, my boyfriend left me, so now I have to destroy people kind of thing. And so I hope they do better than that. But again, to get back on Arthur and Ethan Hawke's character, I thought he delivered his lines really, really well. He sold me on the idea. I'm just hoping there's more to him than what we've seen, because if all there is to him is what we've seen in this pilot episode, he'll end up being kind of one-dimensional. So I'm hoping his character is developed more. In terms of him and Amit as a combination, in terms of writing villains, when you write, or not villains, an antagonist, when you write an antagonist, because an antagonist just means they oppose the protagonist, it does not mean that they're evil. So when you write an antagonist with the idea of their cause is just as real to them as a protagonist cause is to them, I really like that. Like there was a question on Twitter not too long ago, is Galactus evil or is he just a force in the universe? My answer is always force in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but they turned him evil later. They had him do some poorly motivated stuff. And sometimes you can make the same argument about the Borg. So I hope that's where this is going, that it's a question of whose vengeance is right. I think that's an extremely interesting idea. If we're going to take vengeance, or we're going to be doing strike back, or we're going to be consuming souls, or anything like that, according to whose standard. So that's kind of how I felt watching Arthur and the whole Amit thing, that they're trying to establish that, Arthur's like, I can't help it. It's not my scarab. It's not my amulet. I'm just a vessel, and this is like her thing. This is what she does. And so I hope that motivation stays a little bit more pure as the series goes on. Righteous vengeance, or maybe angry vengeance, or anything like that. I don't want to boil down to a jealous triangle situation, because everything don't have to be Dawson's Creek. Okay,
that's the key word right there. I was hoping you'd say that. It's about the righteous vengeance. Who has the more righteous vengeance?
That's right, because that's a very, very good concept, and also ties into what Nim is going to talk about in terms of the whole chaos and order thing. Because the one thing that the Emperor said, I know I'm referencing all these other things, one thing that the Emperor said that everybody laughed at and memed on was good as a point of view. But a lot of the people that believe very strongly in what they believe in believe that.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the standard? That's why I'm excited to see more about what Kanchi brings and what he's thinking, and that kind of thing. But I want to hear your thoughts on Arthur and Ethan Hawke portraying him. I want to hear your thoughts on how you feel the antagonist is presented in this pilot. Because again, I haven't really the evidence that they want us to believe that they're evil is that they get weighed in the scales and they're found wanting, and so people have to die if you've done wrong. But who hasn't done wrong? Who doesn't have some things that would weigh the scales against them? So how was that decision made? How were your sins weighed? Because it was clear in the episode that there's some sins when they say you've been good all your life. Nobody's been good all their life. Maybe mean the good works you've done have.
Well, it's like Thor's hammer. Like you're being judged by your worthiness by this, space god, and now they're getting the same thing here. They're being judged for their sins by something that has never walked a mile in their shoes. So how do you quantify that?
That's what I mean. That's what I find interesting, because it's something we argue about culturally all the time. I have been around. Hold on, I'm gonna let you get in there. I have been around enough different kinds of people to discover that every culture has a crown jewel, and every culture has a worst thing in the world. And what I mean by that is different people believe that this is the crown jewel. This is the epitome of being a good person. If you do this. And every culture has something that said, if you do this, you're the lowest of the low, and you can't possibly be any lower, and that kind of, and it's different all around the world. There is no universal human morality. So I was intrigued by the idea of weighing in the balance, and whatever sins she came up with is game over for you. whatever that meant. That very much intrigues me. Nims, why don't you step in here with what you had to say?
Okay, yeah, I was going to say real quick, just on that before we get to everybody, is in traditional Egyptian mythology, and I got the sense that they're really using that here, except the difference is he's looking not only at what you've done in your past, but what you're going to do in the future as well.
Yeah.
Your heart, your worth was weighed. Everything you did in your whole life was given a value, like +1, -1, +10, -10. And as long at the end of the day, when your heart was weighed, if you were +1, if you were 1 above 0, you're good. If you're -1 below 0, you're screwed. So I mean, and I know that, one of the in Christian beliefs, a lot of people say is like you can't do, good deeds, no amount of good. I forget how it goes, but it's like you can't try and build up, points.
Yeah, it's not a works-based faith.
Yeah, that's not the way it works. Well, that's not what the Egyptians believed. It's like they believed that when you died, you went down there and your heart was weighed. It was the sum total of everything you did in your life. And as long as the scales balanced or were, above the line, you were good. If you were -1, that was it. You're getting fed to Amit. So.
Okay. All right. I got to throw this in a little bit since we brought that up, and then I'll throw it out to you guys. Christianity is not a works-based faith to get into the kingdom. You can't earn your way in. Once you become born again, however, you are expected to grow. And as Peter said, you have to add virtue and love. You have to add character. So in other words, that's a bit of a myth about Christianity, that, you don't have to live a certain way. And then some people use that to justify living an egregiously immoral lifestyle and abusing people. And that is not what the Bible teaches. I just have to stand up for my faith.
No, thanks.
Teaches that
Thanks for adding that clarification.
Right, that because God forgives you, that you can live any kind of way you want to, and it doesn't matter how you treat people. That's not the truth. The truth is, because you become born again, God puts his love and his laws in your heart, and you live that way now because you have a new nature, not because you had to earn it. But it doesn't give you a blanket license, as so many people have abused religion, to abuse people and then say, well, I'm forgiven, or it doesn't matter. But because that ain't true. There's people that don't read the Bible. So I just have to throw that out.
That's not what I was trying to say at all. I was just, trying to put out what they believed. And the best example that was kind of stolen from this and then used in a Christian themed book is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, where you get the links for every deed, and then you could take the links off. It's stealing directly from Egyptian mythology. So
no, I wasn't coming at you with that explanation.
No, he was talking about my comment.
I just know we have a lot of people of different faiths or whatever, and I just want to clarify that.
I'm good. I just wanted to make sure. So.
Okay, number one, but number two, the other thing of what you just said, that's always fascinating to me, as you said, the links. That's always fascinating to me. Just throw this out, and I'm gonna throw this out at y'all. Many years ago, I was a part of a civil rights play that keyed in on Dr. King's contemporaries. One of those people was a man named Bayard Rustin. Most people don't know who that is, even though there are 2 high schools in America named after him, because he was the one that had a lot of the foundational ideas about the civil rights movement, like the March on Washington, like nonviolent protests, which he got from Gandhi when he visited him. But Bayard's name is lost in history because he was a communist, because he was a felon, and because he was gay. So they could not let him be the face of the thing, even though he was driving force behind so many things. And I found out so much when I was a part of that play, and it really changed my life for the better. And one of the things I said in my interviews was, what is it that wipes your name out of history or propels your name in history? What is it that does that? That concept always fascinates me. So that's what I find in this show fascinating, in that we're weighing people now, and we're weighing sins now, and we're weighing goodness now for whatever that standard is. And then it's like, you get no appeal. If the scales tip or whatever, then too bad, so sad, you got to go. Yep. So I find all that fascinating. It's all fascinating because I always want to know what's the standard, what's the bar? What have you done that kicks you out, or what have you done that includes you? And is that on a curve relative to other people, or is it absolute? So all that stuff was running through my mind when I see the scene. So anyway, let me hear you guys. Let me hear you guys about Arthur and about Amit, about the morals of being weighed in the balance for your sins, whatever that is. Start with, well, Nims, you had some stuff. Now, do you want to bring your chaos and order stuff in here?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
jump in here.
All right. Well, first of all, with order and chaos. So, I think that is what's going to be, I think, could be fascinating in this show is that not only we talk about good and evil, we're talking about order and chaos and kind of flipping it on its head, because one of the things I think is so interesting is that Arthur Yarrow weighs, at the time it's Stephen Grant's soul, and says he can't get away on him. It says he's chaos. Well, part of the reason he's chaos is because he's got multiple people inside of him.
Mhm.
The other part of the reason is chaos is because the nature of being the fist of Khonshu allows chaos to happen, because Khonshu is all about, in this sense, visiting vengeance upon those who have already done crime. And crime, by its nature, causes chaos within what's going on in the world around it. By allowing crime to happen, by allowing people to be hurt and everything, you're causing chaos in the world. And Egyptians thought the ultimate good was order over good. They were more concerned with order than good and evil, order and chaos. Order was preferable. So in that sense, in some ways, what Amun is trying to do is good from the Egyptian standpoint, in that he's all about order. They're trying to stop crime or evil deeds, bad deeds, before they happen by getting rid of those who would do them. So I think that's so fascinating from a philosophical point of view. And I think it's done incredibly well on the show. And it's an incredibly deep dive into actual Egyptian society and mythology and their philosophy. Combine that then with Arthur Yarrow at one point summons the jackal creature, and he's talking about, he says a lot of words in Egyptian I don't understand, but he did say something like the duat. Well, the duat is kind of like the dream realm where all magic takes place in Egypt. And he's summoning a creature out of the duat, which is where you would travel between the afterlife and things like that, or magicians would travel. So, that's just really cool dive. I think Ethan Hawke's character is really good because he comes off as that cult leader, as that steady figure who is selling you a product, and he's so charismatic, you want to buy it. You want to be part of what he's selling you. And even when that lady knows that she's about to die, she's not freaking out and trying to get out of there. She was more disappointed that she doesn't get to see the new future. And that brings me to the last point I want before I let everybody else go, which is, yes, from an Egyptian standpoint, you could make the argument that Ammit is doing the moral thing here, trying to bring order. However, from my very Western libertarian standpoint, I look at that, and the minute I hear that type of thing, the hairs on the back of my neck start to rise. And I start thinking about things like China, where in order to bring order, it was deemed moral to kill millions of drug users to get rid of the drug problem in a society. And that was considered the moral thing to do, is just kill them all because you got rid of the drug problem. Completely different way of thinking. So we're talking about order versus chaos and good versus evil. And you got to make some decisions here. And I think that's great. I think that's absolutely incredible.
And good deed versus evil deeds, and how do we weigh them?
Mm-hmm.
How do we weigh them? Steve, thoughts on Arthur and Ammit and the whole, moral, immoral, order chaos balance?
Some of this I want to leave to next episode because they go into more depth on the argument there. But I will touch on some things. I think that one of the interesting things is the idea that Moon Knight does, or at least Stephen Grant does represent chaos to a certain extent, and that totally makes him different from Batman, who is a pure order character. So I think the fact that they actually made that distinction was interesting. But I'm kind of with Nem in the sense that it treats order and chaos as a very different axis from good and evil. And there's a reason why you normally see that, like on alignment sheets and things like that, lawful good as opposed to chaotic evil. They are very different things. Even lawful evil and chaotic evil are very different things in terms of the alignment scale. Because one group of bad guys is going to obey by their own rules, and the other one will do whatever it takes to get what they want. So when we're talking about order and chaos and law and good versus evil, we are talking about two very different things, and yet they are still moral axes with very notable distinctions. And I find that very, very interesting. The one thing that I will say involving Harrow's character, and Nem picked it up immediately, and I was thinking the same thing, is basically this guy represents pre-crime. Everything about this is Minority Report. It's like, it's not enough to punish people who have done evil. We have to punish them before they do evil, so that harmony is somehow achieved. And it's a very interesting ideology. And I will say that Arthur Harrow, as a character, comes across as somebody who genuinely believes this. They have changed him quite a bit from the comics. Basically, they created the whole cult leader character using a name from a very minor villain from an early Moon Knight story. And that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, it's not like the original Arthur Harrow was all that interesting anyway. So, that's perfectly reasonable. But the way that they've kind of defined him is actually very fascinating, which is that this is somebody, you can tell that he's been damaged to a certain extent, and we're going to get into exactly how in upcoming episodes. But a lot of this, really kind of pushes to why he is the way he is, why he believes in Amit now, and why he's willing to go to these, insane lengths for his idea of order, which is very, very interesting. And I'm really fascinated by the contrast of the idea of pre-crime versus the idea of judging past crime, which is what Khonshu is represented by. We have not seen this in the comics. So I will say that in terms of coming up with a new idea or a new villainous idea for Moon Knight in the context of the show, I think they did a great job with this character. And Ethan Hawke is a really great actor. He's done a lot of really amazing things. Gattaca is one of my favorite films. And in fact, that's one I would like to cover one day. Because Ethan Hawke is so good in that. And he's very, very good here. I mean, he seems like one of those guys who's always playing these very seedy characters, sometimes with a heart of gold, but, a bit seedy. With this, I feel like that actually is a little bit different. He does have that Ethan Hawke look, but the way that he's playing it is sincere. He feels like he sincerely believes in what he wants to do. And you can tell that what attracts them to him is not necessarily that he's charismatic, although, he's Ethan Hawke and he is, but really more that his sincerity is what drawing them to him. Like, he seems like somebody who really cares about them. He may not, but he comes across that way. And so I really feel like all of these people, they're not, necessarily all these people that he finds that are occultists. I feel like they're following him out of personal loyalty because they feel like he connects with them. And this is one of the things that we're going to find that Khonshu and Mark are not very good at. They are not good at all at connecting with people. So having a villain like this or an antagonist like this, I think they found a really, really great way to take all the elements of Khonshu, all the elements of who Mark Specter is, and finding the perfect contrast for them. And I think that really makes Harrow an interesting villain. Interesting enough that I actually would like to see a version of this in the comics at some point. Because I feel like between this and some of the stuff that they added in the later episodes, they really thought this character out. And honestly, Ethan Hawke is one of the saving graces of this episode in many respects. He's interesting to watch. He always plays the role in an interesting way. And he doesn't act like a traditional villain would. He doesn't seem to act out of anger. He seems to more act like, you're in my way and you're wrong. And I want to convince you that you're wrong. I want you to join my cause. That's interesting. And so the way that they play him here is really, really well done. And I feel like he only gets more interesting in the upcoming. We'll talk about those if we get to it.
Okay. Before I throw it to Bracy, have you guys ever seen Predestination with Ethan
Not
Hawke?
yet.
Oh my
Not
goodness!
yet, but
that movie with your whole frontal lobe is just going to just watch that movie.
that's another one of those movies by the author of Blade Runner. For those who don't know,
that movie will blow
Philip K.
your mind.
Dick, just amazing stuff.
It is,
and the writer of Minority Report.
Yep.
Yeah, but so and again, listening to what Steve says again, when we're going to get into the pre-crime concept, when you can be judged and judged even fatally for things you haven't done yet. When they're talking about evil or they're talking about your sins, my response is, are you talking about slander, where you kill somebody's reputation? Or are you talking about murder, where you physically end their life? Is one worse than the other? That kind of thing. That's the kind of stuff that fascinates me, because in Minority Report, this guy, the first scene is this guy kills his wife's lover, and they see him do it because he knows what's going on. And so, he's arrested. And then what he's arrested for then should be attempted murder, but that's another conversation because he did not actually kill him.
See,
Okay.
when I watched this episode, though, the thing that really creeped me out the most was the line where he says, "We're doing this for a better world." Whenever anybody says anything like that, I'm like,
the greater good.
Yeah, those are the scariest people in the world. The ones that are the right thing for the wrong reasons in the wrong ways.
Yeah.
Right. And they've never studied history, because every time there's a man-made Shangri-La or a man-made Eden, it always collapses, but it's going to be different this time. Okay. All right, Bracy, what do you think about Arthur and Amit and balancing the scales and order and chaos and the whole nine?
Well, you see, Arthur has the conviction of a man who is going to definitely be on the right side of history, and he knows it. And we see the depth of this devotion with his introduction. The introduction of the series is Arthur, and we don't see who he is right away, but we see the cane he uses to weigh your soul. We see him take a drink and smash a glass, and then he pours the broken pieces of glass into his sandals before slipping them on and walking out of the temple. Now, this is,
by the way,
yeah, very nice touch there. It shows his devotion as a fanatical true believer, but it's also indicative of certain primitive pilgrimages where people would literally march across broken glass or sharp rocks on their knees. Or I've seen examples of people in other cultures who would roll for miles down roads as a part of a pilgrimage. We had the fictitious version of the Berean Call from what was that Tom Hanks movie, where they would flagellate themselves, flagellate their backs to bloody strips. So we know people will perform acts of torturous physical devotion if they are true believers. And so right off the bat, you know that this is a guy who can already push himself to extremes that most of us would find unthinkable. And then when we actually get to see him, knowing that he's got glass in his shoes, how placid he is, how unbothered, how he just moves with the simple grace of a person just walking across the street. And that's really rather chilling to think of how this person is. And because he does consider himself a vessel, he is his own Joan of Arc, if you will. He's an instrument of God. This goes far beyond somebody like, say, a Jim Jones, because unlike Jim, who was on this mad power trip, this is a fantastical world, and this guy has likely met his God in the same way that Mark Specter has met Khonshu. And so he has the complete devotion of somebody who doesn't have to have faith and wonder if their God or their moral compass and all that is real and justified. He's seen it, and he's seen it up close, I'm sure. I'm sure we'll get into that. I've only watched the one episode so far. So right off the bat, that just makes him an interesting and dangerous person, because he doesn't come across as the charismatic leader, even though he is sort of a cult of personality. And he, of course, deflects any worship of himself, again, back to Ahmet, as any proper devotee should. So I'm actually looking forward to us getting to see Ahmet, just as we've begun to get little peeks of Khonshu, see what's going on there. The other thing I want to let's get into is the order and chaos. As Nemesis said, the Egyptians were people who were highly invested in order. And I like this yin-yang duality here. Now, so what is absolute order? Authoritism.
Authoritarianism.
Yes, authoritarianism. Thank you. I don't know why I was tripping up on that word. And we've discussed Minority Report and pre-crime, and I couldn't help but think. Part of course, the thing with a Minority Report that was reflected on is like if you're given the awareness, like, hey, you're going to commit a crime, maybe you won't commit the crime. Information changes things. And it always struck me as weird that the people in Minority Report didn't go out and tell you, hey, like, don't kill your wife's boyfriend. That's not the way to go about it. You're going to end up in prison. We got our eyes on you now. So, consider another option. That would be much better than jailing somebody for life for a crime that they didn't actually commit. Because as you rightly pointed out, that becomes attempted murder, not murder. Then, of course, as you said, DT, we don't know what the standard is. What is a sin to Ahmet? And how deep is the sin? How far does it have to go before you get to that -1? Because if there's this whole sort of loopholey thing that we see in time travel movies that sometimes your knowledge of the future always just leads you to that future. But there are other times we've seen where that you can get away from that because you do have that pre-knowledge. But these people are not given that. And so I imagine if Ahmet takes over the world, what we get is as soon as you were born, your soul is weighed. And so, oh, I'm sorry, this little baby's not going to make the grade, in their 13th year or their 47th year or whatever. And a family has to mourn a newborn babe just extinguished because that's absolutism. And that's what Ahmet represents. It is much better to try and prevent the crime and failing that, bring justice to the criminal than to just arbitrarily snuff out a life. Another agency that was introduced in the Marvel TV series was the TVA, or the Time Variance Authority, which was introduced in the Fantastic Four. And this point is actually made when Reed Richards and Dr. Doom are having a battle. And they're having a duel of time travel. And they're pipping in and out of time, trying to get the upper hand on each other. And this alerts the TVA. And they send agents in, and then Doom turns around and just blows them to smithereens, at which point more TVA officers come in and blast Doom. Now, turns out it wasn't the actual Doom. I believe he was using Christoph at the time, a person he used to be Doom when Doom couldn't be Doom, and he didn't have a Doom bot available. And Reed was aghast, like, oh, why would you let your agents be murdered? And their answer was, of course, if we didn't let Doom kill him, then he hadn't committed a crime. And so there's that aspect of things. So you can't have absolute order because life is, you can look at it as an ordered system, but it's also a very chaotic ordered system. Life is messy. Things go in unpredictable patterns. And the balance of all is somewhere in between, because as you have this, if you look at Jurassic Park and Ian Malcolm talking about the chaos theory, I put the drop of water in my hand, we don't know which way it's going to go, the vibration of the car, deviations of my skin, temperature, things like that. But at the same time, if you keep looking down at things at a microscopic scale, what do you find in our natural world? You find fractals, completely, perfectly ordered geometric patterns that reoccur into infinity. So I'm wondering if at some point, maybe Khonshu on that come to a point where there's a balance between two. They have to accept they're two halves of a separate whole, or will we have this battle to see who's going to win out?
Okay, now I'll bring up something before we come on the pod, and then I'll go to the next subject, because I think it bears repeating here, and that is that the way life itself is set up, actually set up, there's no such thing as fairness.
Mm-hmm.
There's no situation anywhere in the universe where all creatures have all the things in all situations at all times. The way life itself is actually set up is all things according to its gifts. And everything is expected to produce what it can produce based on its structure, its design, its gifts. Not why, is the ant proportionally as strong as the blue whale? That's not, it's not. Why did I get that? How come I'm not like that guy? How come I can't do that? Is not how life is set up. No one says that except people. There's nothing in nature that points its finger at something else and says, how come I can't do that? Everything does what it does. Only people say, well, this isn't right. I should have got something else, or I should be something else, or blah, 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 blah. So what we have going on now is kind of what happened in Star Trek V, kind of a Cybox situation where if I heal you of your pain, you can enter your own personal version of Eden. Vortavor, Shakari. That's kind of what we have going on now. And that's what that reminded me of that watching this episode, because as we discussed, it's like, the people that buy into this philosophy, really feel like it's the way to go. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say what people like Arthur don't realize is that people like him are always consumed by whatever deity they're serving. So at some point, I'm betting money that Ahmed is going to eat him alive. People like that never come out on top. They're promised this power, they're promised this position in the new world, in the new order, if you will. But people like Arthur always get sometimes literally eaten alive by what they're serving. So I'm thinking.
But will he accept that as a true believer? Will he go gently into that good night as easily as that woman did on the day?
He should, if he really believes what he's preaching. He should just take them crocodile bites and be like, oh, well, I guess this is my fate. But I don't see him winning, because people like that never win. Which actually that leads to the second thing I want to talk about, but I'll get to that in a minute. There's something I want to throw out that the episode throws out, which is fascinating, and that is the character of Layla, which is probably analog for Marlene in the comics. But I think it's interesting that, she's calling Mark, and that's Steven's first introduction to Mark, and he's got the secret super spy phone hidden in the wall, and she's realizing that maybe, he's gone or he's blown his cover or something is wrong with him. I'm really, really fascinated by where that's going. And now, Steve has made me want to watch all the episodes now, so I'm probably going to watch them now when we get off this pod. That's all I know what's going on, because
I haven't seen episode 4, but I've seen all the others.
Okay. And so I'm fascinated by the idea of throwing Layla in. I'm fascinated by throwing the idea of a partner for the mercenary that the idiot doesn't remember, because there are all kind of logistical and practical problems with that. If you can't come back into Mark or whatever, that kind of thing is going on. So I want to know you guys' thoughts on the Layla inclusion. Like, where do you want that to go? Where do you think that should go? Start with Steve.
Yeah, this particular character, I know more about her, so I'll try not to spoil too much of that. My feeling about it is kind of mixed. On the one hand, it's very clear that she is a stand-in for Marlene Alrod, which yes. I don't know why they took her out and they changed her. I don't understand it. But on the other hand, I like the actress that they used to play her. I think the way that she's written in upcoming episodes is quite good. So I like, and I feel it's true enough to the idea of Marlene, even if it's not Marlene.
Okay.
While adding, some elements of her own that I am intrigued by.
Okay, that's good. That's good, because you're gonna spoil. That's good. Okay, don't spoil it.
Okay. I'm going to say that. That's all I'm going to say as far as like upcoming stuff. Okay. In terms of what we see here, I think that they kind of established a deeper relationship than they had in the comics, but I don't mind that. I think that it works for this version and for this character, and it gives her more stakes and more of an attachment, which I am for. I will, and the other point I was going to say is like I actually like what they did with Marlene to Layla a little more than what we have seen with other characters where they just randomly race bend them and then they just use the same name. This is a different character that occupies the same role, but it's a different character. I think I have more respect for that. So I'll kind of let that go. Beyond that, it's like I like the little bit of teasing that we get with her. I like that she sounds genuinely concerned. She sounds confused. You can tell that she knows absolutely nothing of what's going on.
Mhm.
Like, as far as, let's just say that as far as she knows at this point, Mark has disappeared and gone in the wilderness, and there's this weird guy with a British accent who is on the phone with calling her. How would you react to that? And so you can see that they're both mutually confused on each side of the line. With Stephen Grant trying to figure out, okay, she's clearly connected with somebody named Mark, who he's heard the voice before because Khonshu has called him that. And so she's like, okay, if she so there's something to this Mark name, and he's trying to find out what, but she won't tell him because she thinks he's Mark, and she doesn't know that he's fractured. I find that really fascinating. And that's a really great misunderstanding scene. I think it's played very well in the brief amount of time we had. And I'll add one thing that I hope is expanded on. I love the reference to Duchamp on the phone, because that is the reference to Henri Duchamp, aka Frenchie, who is the Alfred to Mark's Moon Knight. I mean, to Mark's Batman, which I really love seeing that. I hope that we see him sometime in the series, but I don't know for sure if he does.
Bracy, what do you think about the Layla reference?
You know, I gotta go with Steve. I prefer the fact that they made a new character, even though she's fitting the role.
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather see that than see a character that I am very familiar with and might have some attachment to, just being done over with whatever the flavor of the month is. I actually respect this a great deal more. And so, looking at the character's name, she's obviously going to be Middle Eastern or Egyptian herself in some fashion. And so that's probably purposeful. You know, they want to have Mark obviously has to have all these ties and connections to Egypt in some way, and so I can't help but think as we meet all of his other personalities that we'll find that this is a facet of each and every one of them. Somehow, it's always that Egyptian connection, and so I kind of like that evidence of Khonshu in whatever form keeps showing up in his life. I also thought it was interesting because, like, we know, like, Marlene in the comics is very associated with Moon Knight, just as Frenchie is. And I wonder, I thought it was interesting that how many people does he know and he associates with different personalities that have no idea what's going on? It was like, so does Frenchie know that Mark is a mercenary? You know, like, because like you said, well, like, Frenchie's his right hand man, so that's going to be interesting if we get to that point in the show. So, you know, Mark has become this literal one-man army with all these aspects that end up serving the purpose of Khonshu in one way or another. And the fact that that the Mark personality has been gone, I believe she said for months she's been trying to get a hold of him.
Right.
And if she knows that Mark is a mercenary, I can see why she'd be worried there. But if he's not a mercenary, she's just flipping out because she hasn't been able to contact this guy for months, has no idea what's going on. And just as a bit of amusement, I did think it was kind of funny that his super secret spy phone is a flip phone. You know, it's about as low tech as we can get these days without going back to, like, say, a Nokia brick. So that was sort of a fun thing there. Maybe because that sort of thing is harder to trace these days. I thought it was kind of a cute thing to have in his stash, as opposed to our typical smartphone. But maybe that's the point, because a smartphone might have too much on it. So it's gonna be interesting to see where it goes. And it was a curious interaction to start with, to find out that these other people that we think of in the comics as being very attached to Moon Knight and what he does, that they might also be completely in the dark as far as his activities.
Okay. Nims, Layla and her connection.
Yeah, I think Leo was very interesting and kind of, as much as I liked Arthur Harrow, I thought she was kind of the saving grace for the Stephen Grant character. Because up to this point, I was looking at Stephen Grant as a less serious, less competent Mr. Bean. That's basically what he came off as to me. And yeah, there were moments where I felt kind of bad for him, or there were some things that were interesting. But then when this whole thing happened, and then, I'm trying to remember, because I binged all 4 episodes that are out there yesterday. So I'm really trying to avoid spoilers. But I think that there's an interaction at some point. All right. I'm just going to say, when this all happened, I felt bad for him, and I felt bad for Mark Spector, because suddenly it became very apparent that this is at least 2 people living in one body, and that it made me start to question within this reality. It's like, okay, at some point, Mark Spector was dominant, and for years for a long amount of time, lived long enough to have a relationship and get married and all these other things. And then suddenly this guy comes in, the Stephen Grant persona, and he disappears for months. And it just puts a whole new spin on it. And it kind of put an exclamation point on this situation, which is absolutely terrible for both of them, And so I thought it was a really fascinating thing. It added a lot of complexity to the character. And I will say the same thing with Steve and Jeff said, which is, I appreciate this new character, and I think she just gets better and better. And that's all I'm going to say right now. Because I don't want to spoil it. So,
okay, well, I'm binging after we get off this for sure. Okay, which brings me to my next subject. If you know anything about Moon Knight from the comics, you know that he has a very gory, very bloody, very intense and extreme type of fighting style. And it's normally displayed. So I want to talk about that. Like, again, don't spoil anything that you've already seen, but do you want it to go there like it does in the comics? In this episode, going by this episode alone, they phase out before we get to see any of it, except we see some stuff at the end, but he's fighting, Ghost Wolf. He's not really fighting a person. But every time Stephen comes back from being Mark, he's bloody, battered, broken. His jaw is shifted when he first wakes up in the field. You can see there's always blood spatters. He never comes back from being Mark without somebody's blood being shed. And so, it's a Disney series, but Disney now has Daredevil and Punisher, and so now they have the more mature section, if you will. And so, but Moon Knight is kind of known for that. So what I want to know from you guys is, do you want to see that kind of level of gore in the series? Start with Bracy.
Yeah. I love seeing different fighting styles. I don't want to see every hero knows kung fu or wushu or taekwondo, or the very flashy looking styles that we always see depicted in movies. I like the idea that Mark Spector's fighting style is super no nonsense. That is hardcore, pared down, stripped to the bone. Things like Muay Thai, Krav Maga. I like hard hitting, bone snapping, face crunching. I'm all about that. Kind of like when last time we spoke, we were talking about like the BVS scene, the best Batman fight scene we've ever gotten, probably ever will.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine Moon Knight being a lot like that, where that Batman fight is just brutal. I mean, he is punching people into floors and chucking them into drywall, and that comes across because that Batman is old and bitter and he's over it. The Joker has killed Robin. He's not taking it easy on anybody anymore. And I can't help but think that's how Moon Knight fights. He gets in there and he gets dirty. And I'm all about it. And I feel like they're teasing us with it. They don't have to go super gory. All you need is a few blood spatters, because let's face it, like Moon Knight wears white, and blood is going to show up great on that costume. And so, you don't even have to do the Steven Seagal thing where you see arms get all wrenched around. Just give us a sound effect, give us a little bit of the food coloring here and there, and I'll be perfectly satisfied, because them sound effects can sell the hit like nobody's business. When you hear the old celery stick snap, and you're like, oh no, that guy's knee, that guy's shoulder, that guy's collarbone. Yeah, I totally want to see it go there. And we already know that Specter is a killer. So therefore, Moon Knight's a killer. It doesn't have to be like Netflix's The Punisher, which was appropriate for The Punisher because that's The Punisher. He ends you nastily if he gets the chance. But yeah, I do want to see the brutality of it, and you can still do that in a PG-13 setting and make it work. It doesn't have to be super graphic. We don't have to see the compound fractures. Just give me the celery snap sound effect and have the guy hold his arm at the weird angle, a little bit of blood splatter here and there. We're good to go.
That's what I like most about a mercenary being at the heart of what's going on underneath the mask, because there's not the thing we argue about all the time, whether or not Batman kills and whether or not he should kill and that different kind of things, and should have killed the Joker by now. Because there's none of that with this, which I like. Contrast. Nims.
Yeah, I think my answer is very similar to Jeff's. So I'll just put it simply as like, I want to see the violence. I want to see him enact vengeance upon evildoers and kill people. But I don't need the gore. I don't need Rob Zombie level gore, you know? Yeah. And you could easily with this character go Rob Zombie level gore. I don't want that, you know? It's like, maybe if I was going to an R-rated movie, I could deal with it. Disney Plus, I'm fine with. Give me the violence, and then, you know, give me something that sells the violence, and I'm cool. You know, so short answer, but I think it sums it up.
Okay, Steve.
This may surprise some people, but I am in total agreement with both Nem and Jeff on this. I tend to be somebody who is very like bright and shiny and tends to prefer those types of characters. But at the same time, what I really want is just for the characters to be true to themselves and not to make their morals something they're not. Moon Knight is absolutely an unrepentant, brutal killer. He has always been an unrepentant, brutal killer. This is a guy who was a Marine. He was somebody who killed people as a soldier. He was a spy. He killed people as a spy. He killed people as a mercenary. And he is a guy who is a servant of a god who, you know, preceded Western values and whose whole shtick is about inflicting bloody vengeance against evildoers. This guy's going to kill people. I mean, to me, it would be more out of character if he's killing no one. Now, I don't think that he should be as brutal as the Punisher. You know, I think he should be like more brutal than Daredevil and maybe a little bit less than the Punisher, somewhere in that range. But I mean, this is a guy who, I mean, if somebody comes in, you know, and he thinks he's an evildoer, he's going to kill him. That's just who he is. And we want to see that. Now, does that mean that we need to see it in, you know, gory spectacle? No, I think that they've done a very good job in this episode at artfully showing blood and death. And I think that that's what you want. I mean, convenient cuts away, to Stephen Grant, coming to himself and seeing how many people that, Mark brutally slaughtered with nothing but his own two hands. That's Moon Knight. I mean, I absolutely had no problems with this. So this is what I would like to see from the character going forward. Yeah, absolutely. Continue to do these kinds of gory scenes. Like, I just think that absolutely works for him. This is a Marvel Knights character. There is a certain tone and expectation for these kinds of street level brutal characters. And I think it fits for this show, and I think they should keep doing it. No problems.
For me, it's having a character where we can finally get the fact of comeuppance. I don't need every detail of the act of comeuppance. It's the idea that it happens, kind of like Ghost Rider. But it's the idea that and see, that's the whole crux of what they would call vigilantism, although that is not quite what this is. That's not quite what Moon Knight is, but that would be the whole idea, that there are things, because that was the whole idea with Ben Affleck's Daredevil. There were things that he could do on the street that he couldn't do in the court. And life is always like that. There are things that happen on the street that can't happen in the court and vice versa. And Moon Knight, I think Steve said it, he's unapologetic and unrepentant. And so, like, for me, the idea of finally having someone who, because everybody knows how I feel about the Joker, everybody knows how tired I am of the Joker, and everybody knows how when DC decided to let the Joker do just whatever he wanted, and now they're trying to make him sympathetic or some type of anti-hero, or I don't quite know what they're doing with the Phoenix movie or its sequel, or I'm not quite sure where that's going. but he crossed so many moral lines for me so long ago until I don't. I just it's hard for me to stomach him as a character. So for me to finally see Agent of Vengeance or a vigilante or a mercenary or the combination of the three, not being afraid to mete out what needs to be meted out, you based on the situation, as long as it's just, is really kind of a breath of fresh air for me personally.
It just occurred to me. It's funny. Take either the TV or the new comics version. Peacemaker would be a perfect character here, being fought over by Ahmed and
yeah, and I will say that all these people like you see, particularly like fans of certain recent Batman film that shall me not be named. Talking about we need to have a Batman who kills people. That's Moon Knight. You want a Batman who kills people? That's this guy. You've got him.
By the way, 20 minutes ago, they announced the Batman 2 and everybody's coming back.
So yeah, I do have a question for all of you though. If I could, just quick, do you prefer the Moon Knight with the supernatural powers, or do you prefer the Moon Knight with the gadgets?
I want both, and I love the actual moon angle. I think they should be conditional. Powers are more interesting when there's a cost and when there's a limit. So I want him to have to develop the technology for the times that he's in battle, where the supernatural moon strength maybe not be there, or because that's one thing that superpower people never do. That's Superman's biggest weakness. So many people don't know how to fight if they get the power. That's what Batman's always saying, that you depend too much on those powers. What would happen if they get negated? What would you do? So I want both. I want his powers to be enhanced only underneath the moon. And when that's not available, if it's broad daylight or the moon is covered, you've got your crescent range, you've got your tech, and you know how to use it. So I want both.
Interesting.
I would say it depends on what situation he's getting into, what he's planning for, and whether he's up against something heavily supernatural or whether it's something mundane. Because it is fun to see him going around, with mystical stuff, fighting werewolves and whatnot and having powers. But every once in a while, I kind of want to see him dress up as Mr. Knight with the white suit and the mask and go around with a pair of truncheons and just, knock people over with those. Every so often, you kind of want to vary it up. And I think that, Moon Knight is a character who would prepare a little bit more than some of the other heroes that we've talked about.
I'm totally with DT, and I think that gives us the best of both worlds, because we do have the opportunities for Mr. Knight, because there's going to be daytime, there's phases of the moon. My favorite run on Moon Knight was when he was the Fist of Khonshu. It's where he first got his supernatural powers, and they were dependent on how full the moon was, how strong he was. So there's plenty of times when he was still just regular old Mark Specter, gadgeteer, Batman wannabe kind of character. And but I like that, when the time was right, he had that extra juice at the same time. So yeah, I like both. I like him honoring where he came from to start with, but I also like the progression of the character as he and Khonshu became a little bit more unified in purpose.
I love that idea that DT just came up with the phases of moon, because in the actual mythology, Khonshu's powers were different under the different phases of the moon. So
that came right out of the comic series in the 90s when they introduced him as the Fist of Khonshu.
Yeah, so
I will say that I also love one other thing. Like, he should always be in white, and I love that the idea is I want them to see me coming. Like, I am crazy enough that I am going to take on all of you with you seeing me coming, and I am still going to destroy you. That's
one of the fun things that's always been fun about Moon Knight is, like, he started out as a Batman ripoff, but he really is the anti-Batman when you get right down to it. To the fact that he's like, I'm wearing all white. There's no need to hide in the shadows when I'm coming for you.
Well, in terms of his approach, it's more interesting because one of the things that a seasoned supervillain or antagonist can do is they can study your style. They can see you coming. Like, everybody knows when Superman shows up to anything, he's going to open his assault with heat vision. He always starts off with heat vision. So I'm saying, if you're Moon Knight and your powers are varied and you don't know what you can do based on any given night, or depending on where we are in the lunar cycle of the month. That's very interesting to come up against people that are fighting you, because, you know, they won't really know which version of you they're fighting, which I find fascinating. You can use that to your advantage in a million different ways.
Wasn't there like a werewolf aspect to Moon Knight at one point as well? And didn't he?
No, he used to battle
fought
werewolf
werewolf by night in his first appearance. He's fought werewolves, but I mean, he's not a werewolf himself.
Okay,
but it did fight werewolf by night in his first
now,
appearance.
Yeah, some of those.
He's a
some of those episodes were. Some of those comics were drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz, which was If you get a chance to pick them up, they're pretty terrific. Seeing Bill draw a werewolf.
Because now they have him fighting vampires and then a new guy named Zodiac. So,
because a lot of people don't know that Batman started out the same way. That's why I talk about it so much. He started off fighting the monk, and he fought werewolves. He fought a lot of supernatural foes. He just didn't fight street crime. See, so now when you have those issues that redefine stuff or talk about stuff, it makes people that don't know anything beyond them think that that's the definitive version of the character, or nothing else ever existed. So now that we have year 1 and year 2, people think, well, that's how Batman started out. But that's not true when you go back to his earliest appearances. He fought supernatural foes on the regular.
I will say that if you want a cool Batman movie like that, animated movie, the Batman cartoon series had a spin-off show called Batman versus Dracula. You know, and it was good. It was pretty good. It's enjoyable. It's watchable.
Yeah, they took those 3 episodes and they made them into a feature-length DVD movie.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So,
and if you've never checked out Red Rain, you need to meet Batman Red Rain. Holy cow!
If you want Batman as a vampire, read Confession in the Astro City series.
The Confessor.
That gives you a very cool vampire Batman and his sidekick.
Well, I mean, there's lots of stuff like that. There's also the Batman run that Kevin Smith wrote was not too bad, and I wish they had continued it. It didn't sell well, but he was setting up Baphomet, which was supposed to be like a supernatural type character for Batman to fight, which was pretty good.
So yeah, they leaned more heavily into the creature of the night aspect, and leaned much more heavily in him being able to adapt to different levels of foes in a very type of competent way. But again, you know, they said that was too dark and think about the children and blah, 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 blah. So they pulled him back from that. But anyway, so finally, I'm going to throw it out to my co-host. Were there any scenes you wanted to discuss that we didn't? Any points you wanted to bring out that we didn't cover?
So you want to go first?
No, Bracy, you can go.
Yeah.
All right. One thing I really liked, even though I didn't like Stephen Grant, I did like the portrayal of his problems. And I find that very interesting because as a comic geek, I know that he's got DID. And it was also a nice touch at the end of the episode. They had a mental health blurb, you know, it's like, hey, if you're having issues, contact these people. And that's kind of a fun thing to see a character who's dealing with problems that other people can relate to. You know, there are people out there who have to take medication for schizophrenia, DID, and other problems. And beyond that, when you first see Stephen, he's under the idea that he sleepwalks. And look at the levels he goes to make sure he's not going to find himself out in the middle of the street when he wakes up in the morning. He actually wears a cuff on his ankle that keeps him tied to his bed. He puts tape on his door so he knows if he's been out. And I felt like, you know, I had a next door neighbor who slept walk, and you know, he just 3 o'clock in the morning, we got the doorbell rang, and my folks go out there, and he's asleep on our step, and just picked him up and carried him back home to his parents. And so that's some pretty scary stuff if it's happening to you. You don't know what you're capable of when you're sleepwalking. There was a guy who used to jog in his sleep until he got hit by a car on the side of the road because he wasn't seeing what he was seeing. He was asleep and he was running. And so that's it was really interesting, that aspect of seeing Steven's personality and seeing how he is having to deal with that. but knowing deeper that he is dealing that he's not aware of the fact that he's got DID, and he's always making these calls to his mom. Now that I found incredibly intriguing. Who is he calling? Now he never gets anybody. He's always leaving these phone messages. So I don't know if how aware Mark is of all the other personalities, because we haven't gotten into that yet. But this guy is calling a number that never calls him back, and he's leaving these long messages about how his day is going. And it's not clicking for him, because the personalities are doing things to keep themselves separated or protected from each other, or whatever the case may be. In some cases, like the movie Split and Glass, if you watch those, pretty interesting aspects of superpowered people with DID. This guy, he never clocks the fact that, I really ought to go visit Mom sometime. I'm always calling her. I never get her. That never, puts up any red flags for him. So I'm looking forward to Steven finding out that, he doesn't have a mom, or like she's long dead, or, he's an orphan, or whatever the case is going to end up being. And then maybe tracking down that number and finding out what exactly is going on there.
Okay, Nims.
Yeah, I just have to apologize. I thought my dog was dead just now.
What?
My wife was shaking the dog and had food under his chin for like 5 minutes, and he didn't move. He was sound asleep, evidently, but
Yeah.
I legitimately thought he's dead, just died on the bed. So that's why I was looking upset. So anyway,
Wow.
what was I going to talk about?
Khonshu resurrected him.
Yeah, I got the fist of Khonshu as a dog now. I think what I was going to talk about is a lot about what Jeff just mentioned, but I'm going to mention the actor and the writing. I thought it was brilliant the way they did this. I thought Oscar Isaac did a great job of suddenly, showing himself suddenly waking up in different situations or reacting. And there's two moments that actually got to me the most that I wanted to mention. One was when he looked at the fish, and suddenly the fish was not his fish. Mm-hmm. And that is such a real moment where it's like, wait, what the heck is going on here? Mm-hmm. And then he goes to the fish store, and they're like, yeah, you were just in here yesterday trying to buy a fish with no fin, so it was like right there, you could see the wheels turning. And then he figures he's late for his date. And that was the second moment when he asks the waiter, what day is it? And he's like, he just can't, he feels like he's going mad, because he is, to a certain extent, because he's looking at the rest of society going, it can't possibly be Sunday. It can't. And the rest of society is looking at it going, you're nuts, dude. It's Sunday. And it just, you got this feeling from him. And like I said, Layla put the exclamation point on it, which is just how frustrating that must be to know there's something wrong, and there's something wrong with you,
When you're living a life that you can't remember.
Yeah.
You're sharing a life, but you only remember your portion of it. That would definitely freak anybody out, especially when you had a hot dinner date and you missed it by 2 days and you're like, what?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Layla finding out now that he has or maybe has a wife, or somebody has a wife associated with him.
Somebody has a wife.
But all of that building up to that point with that exclamation point is just like, man, you're a doofus, but I feel really bad for you, because your life is a living hell right now because you don't know what's going on. So,
well, I don't believe Steven made the date with that woman in the museum. I believe
no.
Mark made the date,
it was probably Mark.
Mark totally made that date.
Oh yeah,
unless there was a Jake personality in there and we just don't know about it.
Which was weird, because Steven just kind of went with it. He was just like, "What? Okay."
Well, she is awful hot.
I could see Mark doing that.
Date. Like, why would she agree to go out with Steven? I'm like, no way Steven made that date.
No.
Somebody we haven't seen.
It was probably Mark.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, no, you are the opposite of smooth. All right, okay. Steve, anything else you want to throw out we didn't talk about?
Well, a few things. One, I really want to show how good Oscar Isaac is in this role. I mean, he was always like somebody where I heard he was cast. I'm like, yeah, I can see that person as Mark Spector. We're seeing him play all these different personas. And actually, there's like one point in a future episode where I think he really starts stretching himself, and it really works. But we're going to get into that, I think, later if we continue that far. But I really do enjoy like how all of these characters that he's playing feel distinct. Stephen Grant definitely feels like, this British shopkeeper gift shop guy who is just in the middle of this nonsense that, he doesn't know what to deal with. It's very Hitchcockian. But it's also very psychological horror. It's very Lovecraftian horror because he's dealing with this, gods. He's a pawn in this game between these gods that are just bigger than him and don't care about him. And in fact, when the god on your side is calling you an idiot every time you take over, you know where you are in the pecking order, and it's not in a good place. But Oscar Isaac, I think, really plays that cluelessness, that being out of touch with the situation very well. But he also shows him, I think, trying to cope, especially towards the end, when he starts looking around and starts digging through Mark's past and, trying to get an idea of why he's losing time. I think that all of that is really good. There's really a lot to do with that. The only thing that I really wish they would have touched on more in this series is the fact that Mark Spector is Jewish, because I think that's an interesting angle that contrasts well with the fact that he is a servant of an Egyptian god. So, the idea that you have this son of a rabbi who, and given that
he's enslaved by an Egyptian god.
and these are not groups of peoples that have had, friendly relations over the years. So the fact that there's that contrast, I love it.
That's probably a little too much of a landmine for Disney.
I would have liked, it is, but it's so interesting. And while I can understand why they didn't include it, I just feel like from a storytelling perspective, I feel like there's opportunities that I wish they would mine, but I know that they're not going to because Disney's going to Disney, and they're going to pretty much avoid any controversy they can do.
I'll tell you, I love seeing the Clark Kent Superman difference, like when we got to see the two of them in the mirror. And seeing the difference in body language and body posture. Love that. Great.
I think he took some notes from Christopher Reeve's portrayal of Superman.
And I think you have to give a lot of the credit to Oscar Isaac. I think there was a little bit of makeup work there as well, but a lot of it is the actor. And, it's one of those debates that we always have is how could Clark Kent pass all the time? But it's like you look at that, you put glasses on Stephen Grant, and you could see him walking by somebody who knows Mark Spector and not recognize him. I really do.
And all the nervous tics and all these other things that he does.
Yeah.
Well, remember that time when BVS came out that Henry Cavill was outside the movie theater and nobody recognized him, and he had that was interesting. Well, I think I can safely say on this first episode, there's enough material and enough intrigue and enough potential and enough. Moon Knight as a character is multi-layered, multifaceted. It has aspects to the mythology, and this episode has layered enough stuff in there to make me want to see how it plays out and which one they focus on, or if they touch on all three, or how much they balance DID with Egyptian mythology with any type of quest for vengeance with which personality we see the most, or how many personalities come out, or that kind of thing. And, and I definitely want to see Frenchie and the gadgets, because I love the and batarangs. I love the moon copter. I love all his shots where he's falling down from the moon copter. And like we said, in plain sight in white, so you see me coming, because I'm crazy enough and bold enough to let you know I'm not, his stealth is not the thing. So I actually, I'm glad that things took a turn for the better, because they had lost me until about halfway through, and I'm like, oh, okay. And now that we talked about it in detail, there's a whole lot that can be done here. So we just have to hope that the writing does the character justice, both for those who are tuning in without a comic book background and those that very well and very much know this character from the comics, because it's the rare opportunity to have a rich mythology from the jump. The rare
Mhm.
opportunity to have something that's not black hats and white hats, which is ironic given he wears all white. That's not just good guys and bad guys. It's not just good versus evil. There's way more going on here and way more to talk about. So I'm definitely excited to see where this goes. So I want to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Nims.
Oh, absolutely. Like I think it sounds like we like this. We think it's got some promise, and I think it does too. And I can't wait till we get to other episodes because, like I mentioned, Shabti and Shabti, and when we get to that, I'll talk a little bit about that. There's so much cool Egyptian stuff here, and I think this has a lot of promise. I think it's gonna be good.
Cool. Thank you so much, Bracy.
Hey, glad to talk about this. This particular project gives me a lot of hope. I have unfortunately found the majority of the Disney Plus MCU TV series to be mediocre to kind of bad, and this is the first one that I'm really excited for seeing much more of. Like WandaVision started out pretty good, then it derailed. Captain Winter Soldier just devolved into a mess. Uh, Loki was interesting. Spent a lot of time in rooms talking, which got kind of boring. But this one's interesting and layered, so I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going to go.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, it's really been fun discussing this character. He is one of my more obscure favorites. I think that comes out. But I like what they're doing with the show as a whole, even though that there are certain elements that kind of grate on me a little bit as a purist, but there's more good than bad in it. And even with the stuff that I don't like as much, I can kind of understand some of their thought process with it and why they did it the way in the show. And for what they're doing, I can respect it enough to follow along with it. And there's a lot of stuff coming up that I'm really kind of interested in. I think it's going to get more interesting once we see more of Mark, because I think that's the character that we really want to see. I don't think we want to see Stephen Grant as much. I think we want to see Mark Specter. And when Mark Specter takes more front stage, I think it gets better. And then beyond that, I just hope that they stick the landing with this series. I mean, Disney Plus has had an atrocious record of ending things. They may start things well enough, and they might even have some promise to it. Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I mean, Falcon and the Winter Soldier did that. Hawkeye did that.
WandaVision.
Yeah, WandaVision did that. And then the last couple of episodes came, and then it kind of fell flat. I'm hoping that they don't do that here. And I'm also hoping that they stick to what they've been doing so far and keeping the wider MCU out of it. I think that we need, like, this series needs to grow on its own. I feel like in many ways it doesn't really belong with the larger Marvel universe. If it belongs anywhere or is connected to anything, it should be other Marvel Knights type things like Daredevil and whatnot. But I don't want to see them until Moon Knight has properly established himself. And I think so far they've done a good job of doing that. I just hope they stick to their guns on that.
Honestly, just to follow up on that, I would say if they wanted to introduce two characters together and then fold them in, I think the next MCU character Moon Knight should run into is Punisher. So yeah, I think it would be interesting.
I thought you were going to say Blade, because I could totally see the mystical Moon Knight being part of like the Midnight Sun.
Oh, that'd be great
likewise.
too. Yeah, that would be really
good. Steve said is probably why I won't be watching She-Hulk, because that's going to be just another opportunity to trash characters we've seen in the movies, but I'll digress. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Those that watch live, those that are watching on the replay, don't forget to check out United Capes Podcast Network. Don't forget to check out Comic Crusaders. We have a lot of content. We got retro programs. We got artist interviews, creator interviews. We got interviews with big names. We got interviews with up-and-coming people. So we got a lot of content out there for you. So be sure to check it out. And me and this crew will see you next time on the next episode of Sloppy Spoilers.